Have a grade 9, my dear. You really have nothing to fear. You just have to work hard and follow my tips. A grade 9 is a joy you cannot do without. So following frenzied demand, it's time for your ultimate guide to question 3 from the CIE 0990 IGCSE English Language Paper 1 exam. Desperate to acquire an in-depth knowledge of what is required for this tricky-ish question. Keen to do some more written practice, given that at the time of recording there were so few past papers. Anxious to get your hand on some model answers so you can see what a really good answer looks like. Guess what? You're in the right place. This is Schofield on Shakespeare.
This is how question 3 is described within the syllabus. My understanding is that you need to transform a text from one genre to another. So you might need to transform a fiction text into a speech, for instance, or a fiction text into an interview. There will be 3 different bullet points, with the third bullet point requiring you to make a higher level of inferences based on information in the text. Of the 25 marks, you get 15 for your reading understanding and 10 for the accuracy and tone of your writing. For teachers and those of you keen for past papers, this question is very similar to question 1 from the old CIE 0500 reading paper. The main difference is that the marks are allocated slightly differently. In the old 0500 paper, it was 15 for reading and just 5 for the writing. Here are the top 3 bands for the reading mark scheme. I would explore this mark scheme in more detail as we go through the video and give you examples of my own model answers which meet the criteria within the top bands. However, key principles are showing a thorough understanding of the text through your transformation and developing the ideas contained within the text, i.e. don't just use synonyms to translate them. With this question now being at the end of the exam rather than at the beginning, as was the case with the 0500 specification, it's worth noting the all 3 bullets are well covered statement. In other words, it won't be enough getting carried away and doing a brilliant response to the first 2 bullet points before realising with horror that there are just 2 minutes remaining in the exam. So writing is now double weighted compared to the old 0500 exam. Essentially, the most difficult part of this for me is getting the register right. These days, sadly, very few of us write letters. And what kind of language should you use in a letter, say, to your grandparents or a head teacher? Crucially, this is always going to be more formal than a text or a WhatsApp message, or even an email. If in doubt, err on the side of greater formality, especially when it comes to writing a report. After all, this is an IGCSE English exam, and you want to show off how well and how accurately you can write. There'll be more on the writing mark scheme as we go through this video. Here's how I would sum up the skills required for this question. The first 2 are relatively self-explanatory. But what do I mean by nail the tone but don't overcomplicate? Essentially, yes, you need to demonstrate understanding of your text types, whether that is a letter or a report. But apart from a sentence or 2, don't veer too far away from showing an understanding of the passage. So, if you're writing a letter to your Aunt Jean, for instance, you're highly likely to ask after her pet cat, or say how much you enjoyed your family meal a few weeks ago. But don't spend too long on this. Don't get carried away and start mulling about the relative advantages, and especially disadvantages, of owning a cat or such like. These sentences will not get you any reading marks, as the points do not stem from the passage, but are merely included to show your understanding of the letter writing genre.
Transform, don't translate. Developed, don't just state. Nail the tone but don't overcomplicate. Transform, don't translate. Develop, don't just state. Nail the tone but don't overcomplicate. Say it with me now, one more time. Transform, don't translate. Develop, don't just state. Nail the tone but don't overcomplicate. Let's get on to the meat. This video will now take you through 3 mini practice question 3s in which you'll have only 1 bullet point to answer. In the exam, of course, you'll have 3 bullet points to respond to. Each mini practice question 3 requires you to produce a different text type. First, newspaper report, then journal, then speech. And so some tips are given beforehand about common features of these text types. Read the text before having a go at writing approximately 150 words for each mini question 3. I will then show you my own model response, which you can compare to your own. I also analyse my model response to show you exactly how it relates to different parts of the reading and the writing mark schemes. In the final part of the video, there will be a full question 3 in which you will be required to respond to 3 different bullet points and produce another different text type, this time a report. Once again, I have written a response to this which I hope you will find helpful, and I've annotated this response to show how it meets different parts of the mark schemes. All texts are taken from the same wonderful novel. John Kennedy Toole's hilarious novel, A Confederacy of Dunces, first published in 1980, 11 years after the author's death. It's one of my favourite books, and as part of your preparation for the IGCSE English Language exam as a whole, I would thoroughly recommend buying it and reading it. Reading is such a brilliant way to prepare for the English exam, and essential for those of you genuinely intent on achieving a grade 9. Here's what Billy Connolly said about the novel.
I had a copy of Confederacy of Dunces, and I said to her, read this. And she was in the next cabin to me, and I was lying in bed at night with my wife, and I could hear the laughing from her cabin next door, and I thought, yes, another convert to the cause.
Let's go straight now into the first extract from A Confederacy of Dunces and the first mini question 3 practice. Ignatius Riley is a highly opinionated, obese 30-year-old who still lives with his mother in New Orleans in the United States. The policeman plucked at Ignatius's bag of sheet music. "You got any identification, mister?" the policeman asked in a voice that hoped that Ignatius was officially unidentified. "What?" Ignatius looked down upon the badge on the blue cap. "Who are you?" "Let me see your driver's license." "I don't drive." "Will you kindly go away? I am waiting for my mother." "What's this hanging out your bag?" "What do you think it is, stupid? It's a string for my lute." "What's that?" The policeman drew back a little. "Are you local?" "Is it the part of the police department to harass me when this city is a flagrant vice capital of the civilized world?" Ignatius bellowed over the crowd in front of the store. "This city is famous for its gamblers, prostitutes, exhibitionists, antichrists, alcoholics, sodomites, drug addicts, fetishists, onanists, pornographers, frauds, jades, litterbugs, and lesbians, all of whom are only too well protected by graft. If you have a moment, I shall endeavour to discuss the crime problem with you, but don't make the mistake of bothering me." The policeman grabbed Ignatius by the arm and was struck on his cap with the sheet music. The dangling lute string whipped him on the ear. "Hey!" the policeman said. "Take that!" Ignatius cried, noticing that a circle of interested shoppers was beginning to form. In the centre of the crowd that had formed before the department store, the hunting cap, the green radius of the circle of people, was bobbing about violently. "I shall contact the mayor," Ignatius was shouting. "Let the boy alone," a voice said from the crowd. "Go get the strippers on Bourbon Street," an old man added. "He's a good boy. He's waiting for his mama." "Thank you," Ignatius said haughtily. "I hope that all of you will bear witness to this outrage." And here's the question. You are a journalist who observes the confrontation between Ignatius and the police officer. Write a newspaper report in which you describe the confrontation between Ignatius and the police officer. Base your newspaper report on what you have read in text C, but be careful to use your own words. Address the bullet points. Write approximately 150 words. Just to stress once again that in the real exam you will have 3 bullet points to respond to, and the recommended word count will be 250 to 350 words. For these reading questions in particular, my advice is always to go for the top end of the word count and even slightly exceed it. After all, how else can you show the examiner that you have indeed thoroughly analysed and evaluated the text? But before you have a go at writing your response, vocabulary. I've condensed the passage but kept all sentences which arguably contain more complex words. In this run-up to your exams, how often are you looking up words in a dictionary? Indeed, did you press pause when I was reading the extracts to look up some words which you were unsure about? And if you didn't, why not? Overall, this exam is all about understanding and being able to use language precisely. Whenever you are reading any kind of text, keep looking up words. Keep being interested in language. So, look up 3 words shown on screen now of whose full meaning you are slightly unsure. I would do the same. Press pause to do this, and this video will resume in 5 silent seconds time. Press pause to read through the definitions about to appear on screen now. This question requires you to write a newspaper report. What do newspaper reports look like? Well, they have a headline at the top. The first sentence sums up what the report is about, typically giving plenty of factual details about what has happened, who is involved, and where the event took place. Newspaper reports need to include viewpoints and comments from real people. These may be reported directly or indirectly. The third person is typically used. He revealed that. It was shown that. Completely logically, you would typically use the past tense. After all, you are reporting on something which has already happened. Time for you to have a go. The first part of the passage will reappear on screen 5 seconds after I stop yakking, with the second part appearing a further 5 seconds later, and the third part another 5 seconds later. Toggle between the question and the passages so that you can write 150 words of a newspaper report on Ignatius's wonderful dispute with the New Orleans police officer. Press pause now. Cop nil, kid 1. Yesterday afternoon, a confrontation between Ignatius Riley, 30, and a police officer drew an amused crowd on the corner of Main Street. Riley was asked for identification outside the D.H. Holmes department store. After failing to produce a driving licence, the discussion became extremely heated. One curious onlooker, Gina McKee, 72, told this newspaper that Riley drew the officer's attention to the police's widespread failings across the city, although added, "He did seem to overdo it a bit. What harm did lesbians ever do to anyone?" Given that recent statistics suggest that crime directly or indirectly related to betting and prostitution is on the increase, Riley may have a point in suggesting that police officers should direct their time and energy in these areas. That said, this newspaper cannot condone unnecessarily aggressive behaviour towards police officers who are trying to do a difficult job. Riley struck the police officer with both sheet music and what appeared to be a lute string. How does this response meet features of the mark scheme? Well, the first sentence clearly sounds like a newspaper report. It tells us immediately what happened, who was involved, and where it took place. Newspaper reports need eyewitness accounts. So, to the rescue, Gina McKee. Of course, I've had to make up this name as well as her age to make sure that my newspaper report sounds convincing. Now to the reading mark scheme. Remember, 50 marks for this, 10 for the writing. Crucially, the response needs to show a close reading of the passage and draw out a wide range of ideas. Time for your second mini question 3. Let me introduce you to Ignatius's long-suffering mother, Mrs. Riley. Inside D.H. Holmes, Mrs. Riley was in the bakery department pressing her maternal breast against a glass case of macaroons. With one of her fingers, chafed from many years of scrubbing her son's mammoth yellow drawers, she tapped on the glass case to attract the saleslady. "Oh, Miss Inez," Mrs. Riley called in that accent that occurs south of New Jersey only in New Orleans, that's Hoboken near the Gulf of Mexico. "Over here, babe." "Hey, how you making?" Miss Inez asked. "How you feeling, darling?" "Not so hot," Mrs. Riley answered truthfully. "Ain't that a shame?" Miss Inez leaned over the glass case and forgot about her cakes. "I don't feel so hot myself. It's my feet. Lord, I wished I was that lucky. I got arthritis in my elbow." "Oh, no," Miss Inez said with genuine sympathy. "My poor old papa's got that. We make him go set himself in a hot tub full of boiling water. My boy's floating around in our tub all day long. I can't hardly get in my own bathroom no more." "I thought he was married, precious." "Ignatius? Hey la la," Mrs. Riley said sadly. "Sweetheart, you want to give me 24 of them fancy mix?" "But I thought you told me he was married," Miss Inez said, while she was putting the cakes in a box. "He ain't even got him a prospect. The little girlfriend he had flew the coop. Well, he's got time." "I guess so," Mrs. Riley said disinterestedly. "Look, you want to give me 6 wine cakes too? Ignatius gets nasty if we run out of cake." "Your boy likes his cake, huh?" "Oh Lord, my elbow's killing me," Mrs. Riley answered. And here's the question. You are Ignatius's mother. Write a journal entry in which you give your views and feelings on your day's shopping and your son. Base your journal entry on what you have read in Text C, but be careful to use your own words. Address the bullet points, write approximately 150 words. What do journals look like? Well, they start with the dates. They are personal accounts of our own lives, and so unsurprisingly use the first person. Journals contain feelings and reflections on real-life events, often mundane things that have happened earlier that day. The tone is going to be slightly less formal, although be careful with this. Please don't resort to slang or text message abbreviations. Practice 2 then. As before, you'll need to toggle between the question and the passage, which is going to reappear in 5-second intervals. Press pause now. Here's my response. Monday the 11th of March. What a tiring day. I popped into town to get some cakes from D.H. Holmes, but goodness me, my elbow only seems to be getting worse. It's so frustrating that the doctors don't seem to be able to do anything to reduce the pain. Ignatius doesn't help much either. I daren't tell him, but if anything, he's getting bigger, and that can't be good for him. And, oh my, when he gets angry, I scarcely know where to look. Thank goodness I bought those extra wine cakes from the bakery. At least that will give me a few more hours' peace. The dream of having grandchildren still seems a distant impossibility. I love Chloe, but couldn't really blame her when one morning she disappeared. She could ever get in the bathroom because Ignatius always seemed to be in the bath. This morning he was in there for 3 hours. Who would be a mother? The worry is that Ignatius is not going to change anytime soon. How does this meet the mark scheme? Well, note the use of precise punctuation, as shown on screen, with the commas, colon, and accurate apostrophe. Notice also the development of ideas. In the text, Mrs. Riley mentions her arthritis twice. I got arthritis in my elbow, and, oh Lord, my elbow's killing me. This is clearly a big deal for her. My development of this detail is that the doctors have been relatively impotent when it comes to reducing her pain levels. In the text, Mrs. Riley laughs when asked whether Ignatius is married, and also says that he doesn't even have a potential girlfriend on the scene. My development here is that the prospect of having grandchildren is thus unlikely, and something which is likely to sadden her. Let's dip once again into the wonderful world of A Confederacy of Dunces. It's time for your third mini question 3. Mrs. Riley stood in the hall looking at the Do Not Disturb sign printed on a sheet of Big Chief paper and stuck to the door by an old flesh-coloured band-aid. "Ignatius, let me in there, boy!" she screamed. "Let you in here?" Ignatius said through the door. "Of course I won't. I'm occupied at the moment with an especially succinct passage. You let me in." Mrs. Riley pounded at the door. "I don't know what is happening to you, Mother, but I suspect that you are momentarily deranged. Now that I think of it, I'm too frightened to open the door. You may have a knife or a broken wine bottle." "Open up this door, Ignatius!" "Oh, my valve, it's closing!" Ignatius groaned loudly. "Are you satisfied now that you have ruined me for the rest of the evening?" Mrs. Riley threw herself against the unpainted wood. "Well, don't break the door," he said finally, and after a few moments the bolt slid open. "Ignatius, what's all this trash on the floor?" "That is my worldview that you see. It still must be incorporated into a whole, so be careful where you step." "Had all the shutters closed? Ignatius, it's still light outside." "My being is not without its Proustian elements," Ignatius said from the bed, to which he had quickly returned. "Oh, my stomach! It smells terrible in here." "Well, what do you expect? The human body, when confined, produces certain odours which we tend to forget in this age of deodorants and other perversions. Actually, I find the atmosphere of this room rather comforting. Schiller needed the scent of apples rotting in his desk in order to write. I, too, have my needs. You may remember that Mark Twain preferred to lie supinely in bed while composing those rather dated and boring efforts which contemporary scholars try to prove meaningful. Veneration of Mark Twain is one of the roots of our current intellectual stalemate. If I know it was like this, I'd been in here long ago. I do not know why you are in here now, as a matter of fact, or why you have this sudden compulsion to invade my sanctuary. I doubt whether it will ever be the same after the trauma of this intrusion by an alien spirit. Here's the question. You are Ignatius's mother several years after this incident took place. Write a speech to be delivered to a group of fellow mothers in which you reflect on the challenges of parenting and give advice on what parents can do to avoid some of the difficulties you faced. Base your speech on what you have read in Text C, but be careful to use your own words. Address the bullet point, write approximately 150 to 200 words. What do speeches look like? Speeches must involve the audience, frequently by using the pronouns we or you, but also sometimes by using emotive language. They use rhetorical devices such as rhetorical questions or repetition for effect. When words are spoken, repetition is even more effective. Sound bites, short sentences for effect. Plus, you are also likely to use some stories or details from your own life to make your talk more personal and engaging. Pen poised, inspire those fellow mothers. The text will follow this slide. It's pause time. I'm here today to laugh with you, cry with you, smile with you and despair with you. Parenting can be wonderful, but it can be tough, really tough. When our children hit adolescence, they can be far less communicative with us. Do not disturb notices on their doors, staying in their filthy bedrooms with the curtains closed for hours and on end, not washing. There are no simple answers on how to get through this, but if I had my time again, I would try the following simple strategies. Firstly, from a young age, ensure the child keeps his or her room vaguely tidy. This can then become a habit when the child reaches adolescence and young adulthood. Secondly, no locks in the house, either on your room, any of the bathrooms, or your child's bedroom. This prevents highly tedious arguments and instantly makes it far easier getting your child both out of his or her room and the house. Finally, basic hygiene. Daily washing is a must. Either ensure this becomes a habit from an early age or insist upon it taking place every morning before breakfast. It may be a battle to start with, but it is a battle we owe our children to win. The examiner can tell from my very first sentence I know exactly how speeches work. I'm already engaging my audience and using contrasts for dramatic effects. I've crammed in a great deal of detail into this sentence. As well as the do not disturb notice, I've integrated details such as Ignatius's, "Let you in here? Of course I won't," and Mrs. Riley's, "Ignatius, what's all this trash on the floor? And all the shutter closed, and it smells terrible in here." I have also thoroughly developed and evaluated Mrs. Riley's complaints about the smell. Now time for a full question 3, in which you've got to answer 3 bullet points. I've saved the best extract until last. Ignatius has become a hot dog salesman. Ignatius pushed slowly away from the headquarters of Paradise vendors through the heavy pedestrian traffic that moved to either side of the big hot dog like waves on a ship's prow. This was a better way of passing time than seeing personnel managers, several of whom Ignatius thought had treated him rather viciously in the last few days. Since the movie houses were now off limits due to lack of funds, he would have had to drift bored and aimless around the business district until it seemed safe to return home. The people on the street looked at Ignatius, but no one bought. After he had gone half the block, he began calling, hot dogs from Paradise." "Get in the street, pal," the old man cried somewhere behind him. Ignatius turned the corner and parked the wagon against a building. Opening the various lids, he prepared a hot dog for himself and ravenously ate it. His mother had been in a violent mood all week, refusing to buy him any Dr. Nutt, pounding on his door when he was trying to write, threatening to sell the house and move into an old folks' home. When he had finished the first hot dog, Ignatius prepared and consumed another, contemplating other kindnesses that might postpone his having to go to work again. 15 minutes later, noticing that the supply of hot dogs in the little well was visibly diminishing, he decided in favour of abstinence for the moment. He began to push slowly down the street, calling again, "Hot dogs." George, who was wandering up Carondelet with an armload of packages wrapped in plain brown paper, heard the cry and went up to the gargantuan vendor. "Hey, stop! Give me one of these!" Ignatius looked sternly at the young boy who had placed himself in the wagon's path. His valve protested against the pimples, the surly face that seemed to hang from the long, well-lubricated hair, the cigarette behind the ear, the aquamarine jacket, the delicate boots, the tight trousers that bulged offensively in the crotch in violation of all rules of theology and geometry. "I'm sorry," Ignatius snorted. "I have only a few frankfurters left, and I must save them. Please get out of my way." "Save them? Who for?" "That is none of your business, you waif. Why aren't you in school? Kindly stop molesting me. Anyway, I have no change." "I got a quarter." The thin white lips sneered. "I cannot sell you a franc, sir. Is that clear?" "What's the matter with you, friend?" "What's the matter with me? What's the matter with you? Are you unnatural enough to want a hot dog this early in the afternoon? My conscience will not let me sell you one. Just look at your loathsome complexion." You are a growing boy whose system needs to be surfeited with vegetables and orange juice and whole wheat bread and spinach and such. I, for one, will not contribute to the debauchery of a minor." "What are you talking about? Sell me one of them hot dogs. I'm hungry. I ain't had no lunch." "No!" Ignatius screamed so furiously that the passers-by stared. "Now get away from me before I run over you with this cart." George pulled open the lid of the bun compartment and said, "Hey, you got plenty stuff in here. Fix me a weenie." "Help!" Ignatius screamed, suddenly remembering the old man's warnings about robberies. "Someone is stealing my buns! Police!" Ignatius backed up the cart and rammed it into George's crotch. "Ouch! Watch out there, you nuts! Help! Thief!" And here's the question. You work for Paradise Vendors. Unbeknown to Ignatius, your new hot dog salesman, you shadow his first day. Write a report for the owner of the business in which you give an account of Ignatius's approach towards selling hot dogs, describe his character and suitability for the job, and give recommendations for the training of new members of staff. Write your report. Base your report on what you have read in Text C, but be careful to use your own words. Address each of the 3 bullet points. Write about 250 to 350 words. Up to 15 marks are available for the content of your answer and up to 10 marks for the quality of your writing. What do reports look like? The tone needs to be formal. If your report is for a business, it needs to be particularly formal, and more so than if the report was simply for fellow students in your school. Reports should stick to the facts. As in the newspaper report, you should state the purpose or main idea of your report immediately. Statistics and comments from experts can suggest that you have done your research and really know what you're talking about. Time for your final response. Let's see how well you can write and how well you can show a developed understanding of the ideas in the text. The passages will follow. Press pause. Before I show you my response, here is some general guidance given to examiners. Note they stress the importance of appropriate register, the need for a clear and balanced response, and the importance of genuinely using your own words, i.e. you're not just copying. I wrote, Ignatius's approach towards selling hot dogs is distinctly lackluster and frequently unprofessional. Although he did occasionally alert potential customers to his hot dogs and used an enthusiastic phrase to describe them, he spent far more time eating the products himself rather than selling them. Overall, he seemed reluctant to engage with the selling process and even refused to serve a potential customer. When this young person persisted in trying to buy a hot dog, Ignatius was rude and offensive and implicitly criticised the healthiness of what he was selling. He drew attention to himself in an unprofessional way by getting involved in an unseemly scene before potentially damaging the hot dog cart by driving it aggressively towards the young man. Overall, Ignatius seems to lack resilience. Rather than deal positively with difficulties, he seems to prefer to feel sorry for himself. Such a negative mindset will make it harder for him to become a successful member of our sales team. He also seems to have a genuine problem with food and overeating. It is clearly not appropriate for salespersons to be seen consuming multiple hot dogs, particularly if it comes at the expense of serving customers. He is also a young man with strong opinions, with a tendency to judge others. During his first day, he appeared to refuse to serve one customer simply based on his appearance and clothing. Whilst he may have a talent for rhetoric, he does not seem prepared to direct his oratory skills in an appropriate way. Misdirected diatribes not related to selling are clearly unhelpful. Finally, when things do not go his way, he can lose control and resort to hysterical and violent outbursts. Such an individual is clearly not fit to represent our company. Moving forward, I would recommend that new members of staff complete introductory courses on building up resilience. Ensuring team members have strategies to help them cope with problems should save the company money in the longer term through a reduction in days signed off with sickness or stress. Additionally, new members of staff should be given clearer guidance about using pavements rather than roads and specific routes to take within recommended time periods. New members of staff also need improved training on ensuring a positive customer experience. This should include work on enthusiastic greetings, useful phrases when addressing the potential client and those not to include, and how to deal with difficult clients and/or unforeseen circumstances. Finally, there should also be the option for new members of staff to sign up for anger management training. It is so essential that all salespeople remain calm and positive when dealing with our customers.
How does your response compare? Based on all the work you have done in this video, I would suggest attempting to give yourself a mark out of 15 for reading and a mark out of 10 for writing. The marking grids will reappear at 5-second intervals. Toggle and press pause now.
How does my response meet features of the mark scheme? Well, notice the greater detail and sophistication within my second sentence beginning with although. There are some positive aspects to Ignatius as a hot dog salesman, and these need to be incorporated within my response. Once again, I've applied a wide range of ideas from the text. Note the use of the phrases negative mindset and member of our sales team. After all, I'm writing as a member of the Paradise Vendors workforce. In the text, Ignatius likes to whinge a bit and feel sorry for himself. He reflects on the personnel managers who had treated him rather viciously in the last few days. I interpret this as needing to develop some backbone. And I develop the idea to suggest that such a mindset may not be helpful within the cut-thrust world of hot dog selling. I'm always writing from the perspective of an ambitious member of the Paradise Vendors team. My language needs to be formal and to reflect this. And, of course, it is so important to cover all 3 bullet points.
I guess that's all we've got time to. What better way to sum up this video on question 3 from the 0990 CIE IGCSE English Language exam by returning to a rather fetching rap I performed earlier on in this video. Many thanks for watching. Say it with me now, one more time. Transform, don't translate. Develop, don't just state. Nail the tone, but don't overcomplicate.